All and good morning. It's a privilege and an honor to talk to you all. As Terry said, we're friends. We've known each other, and Terry approached me a few months ago about speaking to this group about culture, and defining a culture is somewhat difficult in a lot of ways, but certainly I can speak to a Chick-fil-A culture, which I feel like is probably one of the strongest people cultures that I've ever had the privilege to be around. So that's what we're going to do this morning. The way I like to do any of these things is kind of more freewheeling. So it's not so much a structured presentation as it is a discussion. And the good news is hopefully everybody on this call has had some sort of interaction with Chick-fil-A. I know a few of you have. And hopefully elements of our culture have come through in those experiences. And some people mention the people, some people mention the execution and the food and all that. Well, all that is very intentional and really seeps through the real culture of Chick-fil-A. So we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to hopefully share some videos with Dan and others that I think are very compelling and speak to the culture. Obviously, there's a wide array of disciplines and companies and stuff that you guys do every day on this call. So it's not a one-size-fits-all type of discussion, obviously, because what you guys do is very unique in your space, and how you establish cultures within your companies, whether they're big or small, is going to be unique. And but all that being said, I think what I'm going to share with you today is sort of bedrock building blocks of culture that sort of originated through Chick-fil-A that I was able to be part of, and hopefully some of that comes through. And the takeaway might be a few little nuggets that you can apply into your business to help understand culture. Okay, there we go. All right. All right. So one here. So let's back up a little bit. So to discuss Chick-fil-A's culture in a nutshell, it wasn't so much created as it became organic through who the people were that started Chick-fil-A. And it's been my experience over the years that trying to create culture is more difficult than just having an innate culture that just starts with, day one with the business. And that's kind of the situation with Chick-fil-A. Obviously, for those of you who know or don't know, Truett Cathy, who was a founder of Chick-fil-A, was really, in my estimation, a devout servant leader first. In other words, he always said, the only reason I sell chicken sandwiches is so that I can help others do what they need to do. That's kind of in its purest form what Truett Cathy was all about, was being a servant leader. And obviously, as the company continued to grow and evolve and be successful, a lot of luck there for sure. That attitude and culture of serving others first was just sort of the foundation of who Chick-fil-A became. So as the company continued to grow and it started out in 1946, actually, in a small restaurant in Hapeville, Georgia, where Truett Cathy and his brother worked. They were working 7 days a week back then, and their primary customers were the Ford Motor Company, and Delta had just started flying. And so and they were right across the street from his restaurant. And he ran, and the Ford Motor Company had 3 shifts a day. And so he felt compelled. He had to serve all of those people 3 shifts a day. So one of them would sleep in the back of the kitchen at night. And when the 3rd shift got off, he would hear the tires on the gravel driveway, and he'd just get up, fire up the grill, and there he went. And he was serving hamburgers and steak and pretty much anything that these mostly guys wanted to eat at the time. And then fast forward on, Delta. This is a little known story. I'll give you a little bit of tidbit behind the Chick-fil-A story. Delta Airlines, if you remember back in the glory days of flying, and not many of us do, because most people on this call aren't that old. I unfortunately am one of those people. Flying on an airplane was a different experience than it is today, and no matter where you went, it was sort of expected. And part of the beauty of flying is you got a meal, and obviously people wanted chicken, but it was determined, you couldn't serve bone-in chicken on an airplane. You didn't want people gnawing on a bone of chicken in the middle of that. So they came to Truett and said, "Hey, do you have a solution?" And he had worked with his mother, who taught him everything he knew about cooking on this breading, which is, now become very, very iconic in our business. And he decided to take a bone out of the breast of the chicken, bread it, put it in a deep fryer, in a pressure cooker instead of a fryer, and found out it would maintain its integrity, and it'd be much more juicy and hold longer and all that stuff. So that became the Chick-fil-A sandwich. And the way, if you look at the script of Chick-fil-A, the Chick is easy to understand. The Phil is the filet, and the A became an A because it was known that everything that was first quality was A+. And so if you bought meat, you wanted A grade meat, etc. So that's where the name came from, Chick-fil-A. And he named it that. And at first, Truett basically licensed this sandwich to others mostly within the Atlanta community. So, he would license it to, the stadiums, like the Braves stadiums and other places, and the Holiday House, and a lot of different ones. And what he found out over time is they simply just didn't do it the way he did it. So he pulled them all back, decided to open his own restaurant in 1967 in Greenbrier Mall. And that was the origin of Chick-fil-A. And then fast forward to where we are today. It's 2,800 restaurants, close to $22 billion in revenue annually, the highest AUVs of any restaurant chain in the industry. The actual AUVs of Chick-fil-A, and I'm not sharing any information that you couldn't find on your own, run just north of $8 million per store. And that's working 6 days. So one of the things that Truett understood early in his career was, he was a man of principle, obviously a man of faith. And a lot of who Chick-fil-A is today was born out of Truett's philosophy. And his philosophy was baked in biblical principles. He was obviously a devout Baptist and was very active in his church. And a lot of people associate Chick-fil-A with being sort of a religious organization. It really isn't. But what he discovered early on in the business is that people can't work 7 days. And if we remember back not too long ago, very few locations were open on Sunday. A lot of them weren't in the South weren't open on Wednesday. and it was considered a day of rest. And that's what Truett believed in. And he believed in, if he gives his people Sunday off, especially in this business, he would have access to the very best people and staff and to serve his guests. And he always believed, if you look at the word restaurant, it's a word that comes out of the Greek dialect, and it means to restore. And so he really believed that restoring not only his customers, but his staff and his employees was essential. And so that became a critical part of the culture of Chick-fil-A, is really focusing on employees and their needs, and certainly the needs of the customer. If you look at the slide I'm showing with you, and please, if anybody has any questions about that, I'm leaving out a ton of little caveats and nuggets and things like that happen along the way. So if you want to know more about the background of Chick-fil-A, just ask. So, at Chick-fil-A, I showed you here the priorities of Chick-fil-A. It's day one. So it's sort of understood that if you're going to work at Chick-fil-A, it's going to be a long process through the hiring process, I should say. It's going to be a pretty long process. It's important to maintain the values and the work ethic and the skill needed for our company to progress. And so the joke is that the hardest job to get at Chick-fil-A is to get a job at Chick-fil-A. And it's intentional. As you know, all it takes is one miss on one employee, especially if you're a small company, and that could create a mountain of issues that you just don't want to have to deal with every day. And a lot of that is just them not getting the philosophy of who you are as a company, who you are as a person. And if you're a leader of your company, and that's incredibly important, that is crystal clear and communicated to your employees. And so a lot of times we, and I've seen it so many times, and we have high need. It depends on the business you're in. You have high need. I know some of you guys are in a construction business and whatnot, and keeping good people is a real challenge. But, we subscribe that if you spend the extra time, do it right, get the very, very, very best there is out there. And certainly you've got to pay them, the benefits and all that stuff have to be in line. But that's really the critical piece. So anyway, I don't want to get too far off track. But so if you look at sort of the philosophy of the Chick-fil-A company, it was pretty much poured into us that God and family was first. And a lot of people take a little bit of issue with that, because there's, even within Chick-fil-A, religion is not pushed. So I don't want you to get the feeling that it is. But this is Truett's philosophy, and there's not a requirement or that you participate in anything religious. And I think a lot of people think that, but that's not true. But it's family first, if you want to look at that. And serving operators, which are the people that actually deliver the connection to our customer out in the marketplace. Serving guests in priority. And if you look at that, it's sort of inverse to a lot of the ways companies think. And the reason I say that is, in a lot of cases, the business is so chaotic at times, and it moves fast so many times, that we're really more focused on bottom line. We're more focused on how do we get new business? How do we generate new business, new leads, and all that stuff? And it's all important. It really is. But in our case, we believe if you do the first three, the bottom line sort of starts to take care of itself. And that's sort of proven itself out. And I've obviously working for Chick-fil-A, I've seen that. So it's really that not to take your eye off the ball too much. If you really think about it, if you look at a business in the sense of, I always use this analogy of a fast running stream. And in that stream, there are big boulders, there's little boulders, and then there's little rocks and pebbles, right? And that's a constant. And if you think about it, the little pebbles sort of represent ideation and strategies and things like that. The mid-sized boulders are more of business planning, things like that. And those have a propensity to change very, very quickly as you pivot your business to address whatever the issues of the day are. So for those of you who do forward planning and a lot of strategy and all that stuff, you know that that has a tendency to have to change to address issues that happen in situations that come up. Those little pebbles. So they're going to continue to roll, and they're going to continue to move downstream, and they're going to continue to morph into different things as the middle rocks do as well. But the boulders are your principles. That's who you are. That's who you are as a company. That's who you represent in your own leadership. That's what you stand for. The boulders don't move. And I think that's a very important thing for people to establish, and for their employees and associates understand that established very, very clear principles you are. And those are forever. And then as we moved on to, and what I'm going to show you a slide of how Chick-fil-A has done that over the past, and then obviously some of the obvious things we moved down, treating everybody with dignity and respect at all times, whether that's your customer, certainly your employees and others, and then constantly challenge and encourage each other to innovate and create new ideas that are sound. And that's really the heart and soul of growth in so many companies is, innovation. And I'm going to show you a video of how Dan thought about that. And then, when I say minimize titles and rank, really what that means is, keep open access to who you are and everybody around you. At Chick-fil-A, we sort of minimize titles, no matter what your role is. It was understood. If you wanted to walk into Truett's office or Dan's office and just have a chat, you did. And it was never, there was never any of this hierarchy stuff that people were a little bit, afraid of, and maybe in retribution and stuff. So it was very clear that it was open access to everybody all the time. And then we also, one of the things that I think that I really, and I'm just sharing what my view was, what I really felt was, especially at the corporate office level, was essential and really kind of changed the way I look at business, is the promotion of cross-functionality. So that passion and talent can be identified and placed properly within the organization. What that really means is, just because you hire somebody to be an accountant, or you hire somebody to be a salesperson, or you hire somebody to be in operations of some sort, doesn't mean you really understand that person. And a lot of who they are can bubble up through cross-functional work, stuff that they have passion for, but perhaps that's not why you hired them. And when we got in, what we found out is that we would allow some volunteerism. If you wanted to be part of some initiative, just kind of raise your hand. And, in many cases, we would not necessarily give you a leadership role, but we would get you on the team, so to speak. And you'd be amazed how talent bubbled up that we were never aware of. And it kind of changed the course of people's careers. And that was something that I had never seen because a lot of the other companies I worked with were very corporate and structured, and you got hired for a role and that's what you did. And so I think it provided, channels and opportunities for people to really move through the organization in different ways that they had real passion for. So anyway, that's kind of an overview of the culture piece. And now what I'm going to do is kind of show you a shared vision. So as we talked about principles and strategies and business planning, kind of works all into the shared vision piece. So I'll fill you in a little story. So in 1983, the company had about 120 stores at the time. And, the company is relatively small, and probably about, around $80 million at that time. And Truett had made a decision to build a corporate office, which is down in Union City, near Union City in Atlanta, south of the airport. And that was going to be a $10 million outlay of cash that he did not have. Truett did not, he abhorred the idea of borrowing money. Part of that was based in his biblical belief that debt is bad, and he just did not want to incur debt, but he had to get this done. So much against his will, he had to go out and borrow money. Well, if you remember what was happening in 1983, some of us do, the economy wasn't the best, and interest rates were in the double digits, 13, 14%. So paying that kind of number on $10 million was going to be a big deal. And it was the first time that he became really concerned about the ability to pay bills. And so he took his leadership team and they went over to Charleston for a getaway. And they were trying to figure out, what does this company exist for? Why are we here? Right. And it was a lot about the discussion was a lot about the business, right? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And which is very common in a business planning meeting. Well, his son, Dan, Kathy, stepped up and said, wow, we're talking about all this stuff about, how do we dig out of this hole and how do we do this? We need to back up and pull away and look at, why are we here to begin with? What is our purpose? And that was a defining moment for Chick-fil-A then, and subsequently, now and into the future. And it created what we call our shared vision. And that came out of us, first of all, the corporate purpose, or the principle that I talked about. And for them, they established this corporate principle, which is now emblazoned on a monument in front of the Chick-fil-A entrance. And it's to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us and have a positive influence to all that come into contact with Chick-fil-A. Now, if you think about that, nowhere in there it says we got to sell thousands of chicken sandwiches or, restructure our debt or any of that stuff. It's really about, who are we? And I believe in my heart of hearts that every company should establish a corporate purpose. Who are you and why do you exist? And, sort of pull back and, get with people and peel the onion back a little bit, get with people you really trust and have that discussion, because I think that's important, because that's the guiding light for your future and what your company is going to be. And that will permeate through the organization to the down to all the employees, because that doesn't change. And so it's important that whoever you hire sort of buy into that corporate purpose, because that's who you are. And then the shared vision is how, what are we going to be? You know, what are we going to be as a company? How is it going to show up in the eyes of our employees and our customers? What is their takeaway with any interaction they have with our company or your company? In our case, it was to be the world's most caring company. And we kind of defined that. And what does caring mean? Obviously, taking care of each other, taking care of yourself, and taking care of your customers and all that stuff. But it expands out into more philanthropic issues and things that you personally believe in that, you know, in my dad used to say, you know, contributing to other people's lives is fair rent for the space you take up here on this earth. And so whatever that means to you all, it's important that, you know, caring is in your world somewhere. Okay. And then winning hearts every day. And that's how we do it.
For words there. And cultures, it's been said, eats strategy for breakfast. So preserving the culture and being a guardian of the culture is one of my biggest responsibilities. I'm the second generation of a family business, Stephen, as you can well recognize, and the responsibilities that we have with that name. On my dad's tombstone, who passed away just about a year ago this next week, is Proverbs 22:1, that a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. And from a branding standpoint, we say a good brand is rather to be chosen than great riches. But you have to protect that brand. You have to protect that culture. You have to be a guardian of the culture. And so it's balancing a culture that has to stay relevant with the incredible changes that are going on out there. And I'll have to use this little illustration. I use this for my little cell phone here. This represents all the things that are changing. And we've got to stay on top of this change. Jack Welch with GE, I love this expression, said when the rate of external change exceeds the rate of internal change, disaster is imminent. And so we're in a constant race to try to evolve our business. And for second generation businesses, 69-year-old business, it's very easy to get kind of caught up in nostalgia and where you've been versus anticipating where the puck is headed, as Wayne Gretzky would say. But on the other hand of, you know, maintaining the lightning fast changes that are going on out here, is realize that the most important things haven't changed and never will change. And I've got to be as evangelical, if you will, about preserving the values, the heritage, as typified in this little New Testament that I've got here in my left hand. We're supposed to hide God's word in our heart, but I don't have it all memorized yet, so I'm still working on it. So until then, it stays in my left pocket over here. It's called my pocket knife. I don't have a full sword here. It's just my pocket knife. But so balancing these two, as we think about culture, it's the balance, and to be as zealous as leaders about being pioneers for change, pushing the envelope for change, going to places that are going to rock our world and shake up our thinking as it relates to the realities of the world that we live in today, and staying very relevant and modeling that for people. Loading an app a day keeps complacency away. So, you know, it's all about apps. It's all about staying very digital. It's all about staying very social and dramatic changes. And people seeing within our organization, they either know that you're on the front edge of things or you're on the behind the curve. And so my greatest, you know, need is to stay really on top of a lot of stuff that's going on out there, and to be bringing that kind of thinking in the organization. But at the same time, you know, having a very clear focus on the values and principles that have never changed, and to be knowing that as we bring people into our organization, they've got to hear both messages in a very passionate way. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.